Ni hao, mes amigos. Je m'appelle Stephen Grennell. I am your Bible class teacher this morning. For those who have not been with me for this extensive journey thus far, I believe that we are in week or class number 15. It feels long, but it doesn't feel tiresome. I hope that is the mentality that is shared amongst the class. And looking back on my slides that I was working on yesterday, I realized that we have quite the journey ahead of us. And let me not understate that, but as long as we're all safely belted in the vehicle, I'll try my best to drive as effectively as possible. That was probably not the best metaphor. We will be continuing from our class on Tuesday. We're going to do a quick recap as is our routine, and then we will get into today's lesson. Where is my share screen? There we are. Wonderful. All right. So yes, as we all know, the title of this study is Lost, a Case Study, where we're looking at Luke chapter 15, looking at the parable of the lost things, being the sheep, coin, and son. And we're looking at them from a three-pronged approach, where we're diagnosing the issues with the characters involved. We're correlating those issues to ourselves to see if we struggle with any of these issues. And then we're prescribing methods that we can use to overcome these issues. We've been looking at the bark bug, which highlights hesitation and course correction that arises from doubt and worry. And we've been looking at how we can overcome this as Christians. We brought up 3 prescription methods, 2 of which we have covered in completion and 1 which we are a bit more than halfway through. So the first one we looked at was the pill of present tense, which highlighted using the things that we have, identifying the things that we can do at the moment to help us to deal with the anxiety and doubt that comes from the unknown. Then we looked at the pill of past providence, which encouraged us to look at what God has done for us, how God has carried us through things in the past, and use that as motivation to deal with our present problems. And we have been looking at, for the past 2 weeks, the pill of post promises. And the pill of post promises is founded on 2 pillars. The first pillar is that God is willing and God will keep his promises. So whatever God says he will do, he carries out. And we saw that reinforced in Hebrews chapter 10. And the second pillar that we'll be looking at is that God is capable of carrying out his promises. And we saw that reinforced in Romans chapter 4. So verse 21 and 22. And it's verse 23 for Hebrews chapter 10. So those 2 pillars are the foundation of the pill of post promises. Knowing that God will keep the promises that he makes and that he's capable of carrying out any promise that he gives. What that brought to our attention then was the conundrum as to why are we not seeing the benefits? Why are we not reaping the benefits of these promises? And there were 2 possibilities that were outlined. One, that there is a doubt that we have in God's capabilities to carry out his promises, hence we disregard them, or whether we are not getting ourselves in the place or the position to truly reap the benefit of these promises. So we started looking at some passages where we looked at what was promised by God, and we looked at where he needed us to be. And we saw that there's a lot that can be garnered if we take the deliberate effort to be in the position to maximize the benefit that God promises. And we stopped last week. I took us down a very long tangent about accountability partners, etc., having started looking at this passage, which is my favorite passage if you don't know. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. Please note, remembering that it is my favorite passage may be beneficial to your team in the future, so you probably want to log that one down. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13. And we got to read the last time, so I will do you the honor. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it. So this is where we left off. Well, not here exactly. Yes, this is where. So we got to common to man. And what I brought out, or what I was trying to reinforce, is that one of the blessings of temptation being common to man is that individuals in our sphere, individuals in our spiritual family are struggling with similar situations, have struggled with similar situations, and have overcome similar situations. That provides us with a resource pool, with an encouragement pool of individuals to support us, to guide us, to help us to overcome our own struggles. But if we do not or are not willing to make ourselves vulnerable, if we're not willing to expose ourselves to others and the things that we're struggling with to others, then we're not allowing ourselves to maximize that resource pool that has been established in the church. So this is where we stopped. We're going to continue from this point. Password. Oh, it look like it don't matter when I say it after all, Sister Smith. Go ahead.
Find yourself an accountability partner.
Loving the enunciation in your password, Sister Smith.
Do I get extra points for that?
In my heart.
Thank you.
All right. Well done, Sister Smith. Let me just make a note of this so that I do not forget. All right. So yes. So we look at no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. And what we garnered from that initial first verse is that everything that we are tested by, and testing when we look at temptation didn't just mean sinful temptation, but anything that can bring about sin, that can be external, whether it be testing, trial, etc., or it can be the sinful the desires that we have that lure us to sin. So none of those, no desires, no internal desires, no external situation has overtaken you except such as has overtaken others. So that is what the first verse is establishing. God is reminding us that everything that we go through, everything that we struggle with is common to human beings. We all struggle in similar ways, in similar fashions. No one is unique in that regard. And then now we get to, but God is faithful. Being an Englishman myself, I took issue with the use of but there. Because as far as I know, conjunctionally speaking, but means contrary to. And I did not see God being faithful as being contrary to no temptation having overtaken us, except such as is common to man. That never sounded like there was some contradiction there. like God being faithful means that this shouldn't be the case. So when I look at the Greek word, which is de, and it's a conjunction, the inclination that is brought up, even though it uses the word but, is reinforced by the idea of moreover or and. And establishes a connection to words, not necessarily a contradiction. So a more effective conjunction in this scenario would have been moreover. Moreover, establishing and also. This is something as well. That is what the but here that is used in Greek is trying to establish. So it is not saying that God being faithful is contradictory to us only being tempted as humans. It is saying that not only are the temptations that overtake us common to man, God is also faithful. So here is reinforcement. Moreover, on top of this, here is something else. So that the but that is used here is not showing a contradiction, but rather establishing that there is more. If you thought this was the only thing, here is something extra. That is what the but is saying there. So God, the extra here is that God is faithful. All right, so here's a reinforcement. As a further matter, besides. So that's the difference there in the established things. Faithful. So the word faithful objectively means trustworthy and subjectively means trustful. We buck up on the objectively and the subjectively again. And as I had said the first time, objectively means that God is the object. Subjectively means God is the subject. And object or subject here meaning of faith. So if God is the subject of faith, it means that we are the ones who have the faith, and God is the source, or the faith is directed to God. And when faith is directed to God, that means we are trusting in God, and that makes God trustworthy. So the faithful God there means that God is trustworthy. If God is the one who is the subject of the faith, meaning he is the one having the faith, then he would be trustful, meaning he trusts something else. So in this sense where it says God is faithful, the verb, the adjective there, meaning faithful, is used objectively, establishing that God is trustworthy, that we have faith in God. All right? So God is trustworthy. What does that mean though? In what way? And it goes on, the passage goes on to establish how God is trustworthy, how God can be trusted. It says, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able? Who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able? So God is trustworthy, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. The word allow here means to let be, i.e. to permit. This shouldn't be nor, it should be or. Apologies for the typo. Permit or leave alone. So God will not permit you to be tempted beyond what you are able. God will not leave you alone to be tempted beyond what you are able. So both of those situations are powerful in the sense that God will not allow things to tempt us, to test us beyond what we are able, and he will neither leave us alone whilst we are tempted or tested. So sometimes the feeling of being incapable of overcoming what we are tested or tempted beyond is because we feel like we have been left alone. But God is reminding us that not only will he not allow us to be tempted beyond what we are able, whilst we are being tempted by what we are able, he is there. He has not abandoned us. So the feeling sometimes that we get of loneliness, the feeling that we are going through it by ourselves, is is caused by our own misunderstanding of how God allows us to go through temptation, because he will not allow us to be left on our own whilst we bear what we are tempted by. The word tempted here is the verb of the temptation that is used at the first part. So when it says no temptation, that is the noun. This tempted here now is a verb of the same Greek word, and it means to test. It means to try, to make trial of, or to test. And this test here speaks to one's faith, virtue, or character by enticement to sin. So testing, temptation aren't bad in and of themselves, because they are a trial. They test your faith, they test your virtue, they test your character. A lot of the times, we don't recognize where we are failing, whether it be faith, virtue, or character, until we are tested. So we think everything is okay. We think that our faith is where it should be in God, that we believe in him, that we trust him beyond all measure. And then our child gets sick. And the illness progresses worse and worse until the child loses their life. And now, all of a sudden, the faith that we viewed to be unwavering, the faith that we viewed to be secure and stable, is now wavering, is now brought under severe questioning. And as much as none of us want to go through that kind of trial, overcoming those tests, the benefits to one's faith, virtue, and character cannot be measured when compared to not being tested at all. For those who know about diamonds and how diamonds are formed from carbon, it is due to immense pressure and compression that turns carbon into, or creates that form of carbon that is diamond. The difference between coal and diamonds. And a lot of us want to be diamonds. A lot of us want to shine like diamonds. Forgive me for quoting Rihanna. A lot of us want the faith and the virtue and the character that is glorious and wonderful. But we don't want the test. We don't want the sickness. We don't want to watch our loved ones suffer and be incapable of providing any physical relief. We don't want to lose the job. We don't want to suffer poverty. We don't want to suffer persecution. But those trials, those tests are what prove, firstly, our faith and our virtue and our character, and also what strengthen our faith, virtue, and character. It's like your immune system. An individual that is never exposed to bacteria, to viruses, will have no immune system. The minute they are exposed to any form of pathogen, their entire system is compromised, because their body has not built up immunity to these diseases. We go through these illnesses, we get vaccines so that our body can build up its immune system, so that when we are exposed to more dangerous illnesses, our body has already stabilized its defense system. But if we're never exposed at any point in time, then once we do become exposed, we will be completely exposed. So don't look at temptation as necessarily a horrible thing. Look at it as a test. Look at it as a trial, a means to prove yourself to God, a means to strengthen yourself. And the reason why we can look at it that way is because God is faithful, because God can be trusted. And what can God be trusted in? In ensuring that whatever test, whatever temptation, whatever trial it is not beyond what we are able. What does the word beyond mean? Beyond, it's a preposition, and prepositions show position. And in this case, the position that is being shown is over. And over here means above, beyond, or across. So over can literally mean position in regards to direction. It is above something. Or over can mean in regards to a threshold. So it has exceeded a particular threshold. It is over a particular point. It is beyond that. So God is saying that we will not be tempted above what we are able. We will not be tempted beyond what we are able. Our ability here establishing the threshold. So no temptation will pass the threshold of our capabilities as individuals. The word what here. So it says beyond what you are able. And what is a pronoun. And it is used as a relative pronoun. And what relative pronouns do is relative pronouns show a relation. So what the what here is referencing, it is showing the relation between the things that you are capable of overcoming. So that what there is a spectrum of everything that you are capable of overcoming. So any trial, any temptation, anything that you are capable of overcoming falls in that category of what. So think of for those who do math, think of a Venn diagram. And the Venn diagram has, the big circle, and within the circle, so we'll call that circle what? Within that circle of what lies every potential trial, temptation, test that you as an individual on this earth will go through. So that what there holds every potential test, every potential temptation. What God is telling us is that no test, no temptation will occur to us that falls outside of that circle. Because that circle represents what you are able. Everything else on the outside, everything else, every other thing, every other test, every other temptation that falls outside of that circle, we will not encounter. Because God has promised us that our temptation will not exceed what we are able to overcome. And the word are able, dynamai, I think that's the right pronunciation, means to be able or possible. To be able or possible. So God will not allow us, God will not permit us to be tested over what we are able to do or can possibly do. Which now calls into question, what is the reflection of that temptation? But before we get there, let us look at another establishment that another promise that God has established. So remember, we are looking at these passages to highlight the promises of God. So the first promise that God made in this passage is that no temptation has overtaken us except as is common to man. So that's a promise of reassurance that we're not going to be tempted uniquely. The second promise, which is what we just looked at, is that God will not permit us to be tested beyond what we are able. And now we reach a third promise. And we see another but. Hold on, seeing something in the chat. Let me see. All right, so pressure builds diamonds. So that's Natasha reinforcing what I said. Kirk says, do you think that the what we are able to differs from individual to individual? Very much so, Kirk. Very much so. That the you there is a very specific pronoun, and every individual has different strengths. Every individual is capable of overcoming different things more effectively than others. So I believe that there are things that people are going through that when I look at it, I don't think that I can go through it. And the very reason why I may not be going through it is because I may not have the ability to overcome it. And sometimes you look at the person and you say, boy, that person's life is so much harder than yours is. And that may be true of the time period, as in that time that the person is going through it versus what you're going through at the moment. But that person may look at struggles that you are having and say, boy, that would have bowled me. I don't know how you overcome that. What we can find reassurance in is that because God is faithful, once we are tested or tried by something, that means we are able to overcome it. So we may not be able to identify if the things that we are not being tested by, whether we would have been able to overcome or not, but we can get comfort in the knowledge that once we are tested by it, God has given us assurance that we can overcome. What that overcome means, however, we will get to when we look at the bear it aspect. All right, thanks for that question, Kirk. Any other questions, any other comments? All right, hope I'm not moving too fast. I presume that we're getting things. All right. So, but the conjunction is used again, and it is a different word that is used for the conjunction, and it is Allah, and it means other things, and it is used adverbially. Don't make the English get to you. I'll break it down for you. So the reason it is used adverbially is because the word that best encapsulates it in English is actually an adverb, which is nevertheless. And nevertheless is what we call a conjunctive adverb. Why are you using those horrible terms, Stephen? Don't worry about it. Remember, I said that conjunctions link words or group of words. Conjunctive adverbs are adverbs that link words or groups of words, but they link them across sentences. So whereas conjunctions link within sentences, adverbs link one sentence to another. So in this particular passage, the but here would have been preceded by a full stop. So the first sentence would end, and then the word that would be used would be nevertheless. And because it is linking one sentence with another, rather than being a conjunction, it is an adverb that functions like a conjunction. Hence the word conjunctive adverb. So nevertheless means in spite of that, all the same, or notwithstanding. So I really like the fact that nevertheless is the adverb that is used linking these two sentences, because it reinforces how powerful the promises within this passage are. In spite of that, with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it. This is God giving us something, recognizing that what he has given us is enough, and saying, hey, guess what? See something else here. So God has given us the assurance that we will not be tempted uniquely, that there will be individuals going through what we're going through, and that in and of itself is a place of support. God has told us that we are able and capable of overcoming the temptations or testing that will come upon us. So God has promised that. And God is saying that in spite of those promises, in spite of that reassurance, in spite of recognizing that you are capable, see something else here. Here is another guarantee, another reassurance. I see a question, Tommy, and I'm going to look at that specifically when we look at the term bear it. But yes, that is the question that I was always wondering. Is the beyond what we are capable establishing our threshold to manage temptation? That's a good question. So I'm going to reinforce that when we look at bear it, or at least the differences between bear it and are able. So nevertheless, with, the word with here is a preposition, fin. And as I said, prepositions show position. And the preposition here denotes union. It can mean with or together. It gives the idea of one thing being enwrapped with another. Think of buy one, get one free. Them usually tape up, so like them have a Doritos and Pepsi. Buy one, get one free thing. You buy up Doritos, you get a Pepsi, and you get air in the Doritos. But that's not the point. So they usually tape the Doritos with the Pepsi if you go supermarket shopping, to make sure that once you buy one, you get the other. That is the idea behind the with that is used here. An idea of unity, an idea of togetherness. One does not come without the other. What is this used to unite though? What two things are being united? Based on the passage we said, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape. What the passage is telling us is that the way of escape and the temptation are two parts of one package. They are bound together. There is union. They are together. One does not come without the other. God has provided that there is a way of escape that is bound together with our temptation. Another word for with here, it shows by association or companionship. And this temptation here, it's a different word than the initial temptation, but it brings across the same meaning. So a putting to proof by experiment, by experience, or by solicitation. And it speaks to the trial of man's fidelity, integrity, virtue, or constancy. So as we had brought up when we looked at test, about it showing us where our fidelity stands, where our integrity stands, where our constancy stands. Are we going to hold fast? Are we for God regardless of the circumstances? These tests, these temptations provide the proof. So when we go through it now, the proof is there. And I'm sure when we think of this terminology, Job comes to mind, where his temptation was literally a putting to proof. Satan questioned his faith and said that it was circumstantial, that it was because of the good things in his life. God said, no, it's not that. I know that he is constant. I know that he is virtuous. I know that he is faithful. So Satan said, all right, let me put it to proof. Let me get the evidence to support that. And how can I get the evidence? By testing him. By putting him in circumstances that try his fidelity, that test his constancy, that cause him to question his virtue. And we know all of the things that Job went through. The loss of family, the eventual loss of health, the loss of wealth. What would happen to us if we are put to proof? Are the things that we are proud of, are the things that we claim to be stable and firm and secure, our faith in God, our belief in his promises, our assurance that we will stay true to him, can those things be put to proof? Do we want them to be put to proof, or are we begging that no circumstances will ever come to reveal how shaky these things really are? Are we basking in the fact that we live in Jamaica, a country where, for the most part, even though people are evil, people still establish God as their sovereign leader? Could we survive? Could our faith survive if we were in a nation where one of the greatest tests is persecution? Would we be worshiping on Sundays, knowing that if it ever comes to light that we are serving God, that our lives would be in jeopardy? These are the things that we need to secure from early, so that providing we ever go under these tests, we can pass them. We don't need to wait, This is not the only way to strengthen ourselves. It's not only through trials that our faith can be strengthened. So we don't need to wait on the trials to come to actually get the strength that we need. But we also have to ensure that we're not fooling ourselves. It is not because of the lack. It's not because of the lack of these trials that we are comfortable. So temptation here means putting to proof, and essentially leads to an enticement to sin. And a lot of the times when we hear enticement, we think of just the internal desires. But anything that leads us to sin, whether it be lack of faith as a result of loss of job or malice because someone hurt you, that is an enticement to sin. So any situation that leads to you being inclined to sin is an enticement. So God tells us that this temptation here, this putting to proof, this trial, this testing, is a part of a package. What is the other part of the package, we ask? The other part of the package is the making of the way of escape. So to make in the Greek means to make or to do, and it brings across the idea of producing, constructing, forming, or fashioning. So you get the idea of using, it almost brings across the idea of using the hands to bring something into being. So when you think of producing things, especially of livestock, you get the idea of planting and reaping. Constructing, you get the idea of building, so you use cement to make bricks, etc. Forming, fashioning, you get the idea of the usage of the hands to create. And that is what is being established here, that God is the one who has produced, constructed, fashioned the way of escape. And that, once again, is comfort. God is not just telling us that there's a way of escape, somewhere, and you have to figure it out, or you have to bulldoze through it, or you have to use your brain and activate it. No, God is telling you that He has made it. He has produced it, constructed it, formed it, fashioned it. It is there because He has brought it about. And the God that we know, who is willing to keep His promises and is capable of carrying them out, is the one who has, in similar fashion, fashioned this way of escape. So we don't have to question the validity of this way of escape. We don't have to question if it actually will work, how effective it is. And a lot of the times, we fall in our temptations in an attempt to create a way of escape that, when compared to God's way of escape, fails in all manners. The way of escape God is establishing is there and is packaged with the temptation. But what is this way of escape? So it means an exit, literally or figuratively. An egress, a way out, or an end. So egress, here's another word that we're learning. I did not know this word. I heard egress, it sounds like egret from Game of Thrones. But egress means the action of going out of or leaving a place. So an egress is the action of going out or leaving a place. So what the way of escape is for us is an exit, meaning that we will be able to leave the temptation, the testing, the trial. Or it is an end, meaning that the temptation itself has a time limit. So the exit is either God will provide a way that we will move out of the temptation, out of the testing, or the testing itself will expire. It will only last for a particular period of time. So what God is telling us is that with every temptation, there is an exit. And that exit is either that you will be able to leave it, or it will end of its own natural course. However, it does not leave it there. It does not leave it there. It goes on to say that. And that is a pronoun and it is a relative pronoun, just like what was that we saw earlier in the verse. And what that does, it shows a relation between clauses. So that is saying that what is following me, what I am about to say now, is related to what was said earlier. And what was said earlier is that with the temptation will come a way of escape, an exit. This that is going to be said now is related to the fact that an exit will come with the temptation. And that relation is that you may be able to bear it. So the way of escape that is provided with the temptation is provided so that we are able to bear it. And for us to properly understand exactly what is being brought out there, we need to ensure that we understand the terms that are being used. So Tammy had asked me in the chat, let me make sure I get the question right, what we are able to speak to our threshold to manage temptation. That was a question that she had asked. So we're going to see if that is the case. So we see firstly here the same verb that is used in the first part of the verse. So where the passage says, God will not allow us to be tested beyond what we are able, this is the same verb that is used there. So having the ability to, in one case, is the same word that is used here. So God is saying that the way of escape will give you the ability. The way of escape will make it possible for you to do what? To bear it. And the word bear it here means to bear from underneath. Hypothero, I think that's the right pronunciation. And the idea behind that is to bear patiently or to endure. It gives the idea of having something on top of you that is pressing down on you, but does not cripple you, does not crush you, does not press you down underneath it. So you are holding it up. You are bearing it from underneath. And this is one of, or the aspect of this verse that a lot of us don't like. When we hear the way of escape, we want instant removal of the testing or the temptation. We want it gone. We want the temptation to be blown away and for us to come out unscathed on the other end. But that is not what God is telling us. God is telling us that you leaving the temptation is through bearing it, or the temptation coming to an end is through you bearing it. That is why that is so important here, because you being able to bear it is related to how the way of escape works. That is your way of escape. Your ability to bear, your ability to endure. That is what I am providing you with. Brother Smith says that perspective of temptation is that it is like a problem. Don't we actually go seeking the temptation? All right, so Brother Smith, that is an excellent statement. So this testing, this trial, speaks to the things that we go through to test us and to strengthen us. And these are the things that come from God. These are the things that come from God. These are the things that come from within us that are drawn out or drawn to by the situation. So there are things that within us that we desire that will be drawn to circumstances that arise in our lives. Similarly, there will be circumstances that arise in our lives that will test us, that will try us. Nothing is wrong with those things. It is our response to those things that will determine whether we sin or not. But now, Brother Smith is bringing up the fact that this passage speaks differently to the idea of us going now and finding things. That is different. So we cannot readily apply what God promises in this circumstance to a different circumstance. As I had established, although there are no prerequisites to access this benefit, the application of the benefits are circumstantial. And the circumstance here being that we have not actively gone now to sin. This is a circumstance now where we are tested or tried. The avenues to escape them, Brother Smith, I'm not sure what the avenues there are. So there are a lot of passages that speak to how to deal with sin, having actively sought that sin. But I don't want the context of this passage to become muddled. So I don't want to tell you that it's the same in this aspect as it is in others, because the writer very carefully links how the situations work in one situation with another situation. So this one is the link is very clear. So Tommy, I would say yes. Based on this passage, what we are able to speak very specifically to our threshold to manage temptation, what we are capable of bearing. And we will never be tested by God. We will never be tempted by God beyond that threshold. However, as Brother Smith so importantly established, we can place ourselves in situations that we cannot bear by our own doing. We now going and seeking a situation that is too much for us. That is an entirely different situation. The promise that we have of God, the faith that we have in God, is that situations that arise in our lives that are not of our own sinful doing will never be too much for us to bear, will never be too much for us to endure, will always have a way of escape or an end. And when we are trying to live right, one of the greatest discouragements is the sins that occur whilst we are trying to have the right motive and mindset. Because it can easily feel as though this is something that we can't do. It can easily feel that, boy, God asked me for too much. We need to find the reassurance that we can do it. There's a massive difference between failing a test that you know that with proper study, diligence, and preparation you can pass, versus failing a test that you know you don't have the capability to pass. Let us look at when we fall, that when we give in to temptation, that it is not that it was beyond us, but rather that we were ill prepared. Let us believe that we are capable. Let us believe that we can overcome because God has assured us of that. And let us use every setback, every falling short to compress us as pressure to make us diamond, to help us to be the type of people that we need to be. As Brother Smith said, yes, so we need to look at how to deal with the temptations that we go and seek. And actually, Brother Smith, when we look at the son, the prodigal son, that will primarily be addressed. So as we know with the prodigal son, he left his father in search of a particular lifestyle. So when we are looking at the lost son, and we'll be diagnosing, correlating, and prescribing those situations, we will be looking specifically at how to deal with falling in sin of our own volition. Tammy saying, so our current threshold may differ from each other now, but that the ultimate plan is for this to be the same. Current threshold differing meaning what I am capable of dealing with versus what you are capable of dealing with, Tammy? Is that what you're saying?
Stephen, yes, I'm just trying to understand the question about whether or not it differs from individual to individual. Because if we're looking at this being the level of threshold, this being a threshold of us being able to manage temptation, I'm thinking that if it differs, then it almost is like there's a different level of righteousness or something like that. Is it that this is where we are now, but it's that we're trying to build up to a standard? So there should be isn't there a standard that we're trying to get to, or that God is holding us accountable to? That yes, He's going to give us a way out. Sorry?
The last thing I heard was way out.
Right. Now I was saying that, so He's giving us a way out. I'm just trying to understand how that difference in where our threshold is. All
right, I understand what you're saying, Tommy. I understand what you're saying. And maybe I...
Can I say something, Stephen?
Yeah, go ahead, Kirk.
Stephen?
Yeah, go ahead, Kirk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if I agree with the threshold. Maybe that's a part of it. But my understanding is remember, God is building us up to be spiritual stones, to be more like Jesus, etc., etc. So I think that the temptations that we face are the parts of us that are less like Jesus, and He's trying to build those parts up. And that's where the difference, I would say, comes from person to person. That what I am struggling with or what I need a temptation to bring out so I can work on, you may have worked on it already, or you may not even have that issue to begin with. So I think that's where the differing from person to person comes in.
All right, Kirk. I heard it. Let me. I think I am at fault in this circumstance because I should not have encouraged the idea of looking at other individuals. So the reason I had brought that up, the individuals, is that sometimes we look at individuals and we say we couldn't. I don't see how, based on what that person is going through, how I would have been able to deal with that. And what I wanted to bring from that idea is that once that person is going through that, because God is faithful, God has ensured that that person will be able to bear it. Bearing it means enduring without sinning. Bearing doesn't mean necessarily physically it coming to an end or it leaving you. So the leaving and the coming to an end of the make of escape speaks to staying spiritually pure. It doesn't necessarily mean that the trial or testing will go away in a physical sense. So let me make that very clear. That's what I wanted to end on. Paul spoke to God 3 times, we are thorn in the flesh. And God said that his grace is sufficient. A lot of the things that are tests or temptations are tests or temptations because of their enticement to sin. When we are no longer enticed to sin, that would be defined as the way of escape. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what was used as the test or the temptation will go away. So, for example, if I hear that I get cancer and that now shakes my faith in God, that is a test, that is a trial, that is a temptation that I am going through, that God has assured me that I have the capability of bearing, of enduring without sinning. When I am no longer tested, so it is no longer shaking me, it is no longer calling into question. It has been proven that my faith, my fidelity, my constancy with God remains sure. Does that mean the cancer is gone? No. I could very well still have cancer. Cancer could kill me. But if my constancy, if my faith, if my virtue is stable, or even if it wavers, but it returns to the point that is pleasing to God, then I have escaped the temptation. I have escaped the trial. When it is no longer an enticement to sin, I have endured. And I understand what you're saying, Tammy, and I will answer it by saying, let us not concern ourselves with the differences in individuals, because that no, I don't have the power from this passage to state that the threshold is different. What I can definitively tell you is that your threshold, whatever you are tempted or tested by, is within your threshold to endure. That I can definitively say. Every individual is tested or tempted by God within their threshold. You have the ability to bear it, because God will not test you outside of that, because God will provide a way of escape. Those are the assurances that are provided. So thank you, Tammy, for bringing that up. In hearing you say it, I understand the confusion that was brought up. I hope that, well, based for you, you said that it's clear. I hope that's clear for everybody else, or that nobody else was confused as a result of that. All right. We are out of time. So I'm going to give you the password for next week. Also, so the password for next week is the way of escape. The way of escape is the password for next week. And or what we're going to be looking at on Tuesday, next week, on Tuesday, next class, we're going to be looking at one more verse, Psalm chapter 37, verse 3 and 4. This is a very interesting verse. I always love to hear it quoted, and I always wonder what the implications are. But we're going to be looking at this, and that will be the last verse that we're looking at on the Pillar of Post promises. We're going to conclude the bark bug with a final exercise, and then we are going to move into another symptom. We're going to be moving into another symptom. We have been on bark bug for quite some time, but it has been a fruitful study. So the way of escape, just a reminder that is the password for next week. I want to thank you all for your participation, as per usual, and I will now hand over to Engel to do the announcements.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks everyone for spending time with our Bible class this evening. In terms of announcements, let us remember Sister Hobbs' birthday will be on the 3rd, that's Thursday, the 3rd of December. And so we will wish Sister Hobbs a happy birthday on Thursday when that comes around. On Tuesday will be on Tuesday will be our Bible class. So we meet again, continue our discussion on the subject lost a case study on Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. at this very same Zoom link. On Saturday, we're encouraged, please remember Saturday a new new topic, navigating life, our navigating life series, begin at 6:30 this Saturday at 6:30 p.m. This very same Zoom link. As we continue the discussion, the focus will be shifting to things within the marriage relationship, and so we just ask that we share the information. When I get the exact topic, then we'll have an updated flyer, and we ask that you continue to share with others and invite them to this session. Please remember our gospel meeting is the 13th to the 15th this month, the 13th to the 15th of this month. And next year we have our Kickstart gospel meeting the 10th to the 12th. Please remember the clothing drive. The collections are on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And if you're able to do these drop-offs, you're encouraged to assist and support in this program. Also, if you need special arrangement outside of these hours, then we can call our WhatsApp 532-9891. Brother Rowan had sent an announcement earlier, but because I've logged out and logged back in, I don't see it. So if he wants to mic up, he can mention that particular announcement at this time. Brother Ron, you want to do so?
Sure, thanks. Afternoon, everyone. So the congregation has been collecting clothes to help the flood victims of the recent heavy rains in rural St. Andrew. We have handed over, we've been working with the constituency representative for the area. And so far we've handed over one full barrel of clothes as well as several bags, about two suitcases, and as well as several bags of clothes as well. We continue the collection for the next 2 weeks. So please, if you can share the information with your family, your friends, and also if you haven't donated as yet, if you can look in your closets. If there's any clothes that you don't wear that's in good condition, to donate as well. We'd like to have to collect a third batch and then hand those over. The hope is that we'll have even more clothes so that we can donate, to more families, because quite a few families have been literally flooded out and have lost everything in the recent heavy rains over October, September period. Thanks. Oh, and as it relates to the collection, it's on the flyer, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. If for any reason you may have the clothes and can't deliver any of those days for the next 2 weeks, you can send a message to the WhatsApp number on the screen, and we will make arrangements to collect at a convenient time.
Okay, Ron. Thanks for the announcement. Just at this time, we just like to ask everyone to keep the Dallas family in prayer, please. At this very time, I just got a message relating to Brother Indala. that Brother Endala passed on. And so let us seriously just pray for the everyone affected. I'm sure we all are a hard one this one at this time. Let us go to God in prayer at this time, please, church. Almighty Father, we just we pray with the Endalas, with each and every one of us, as we have had this news. We just, Lord, just look to you for the comfort, and we just pray, oh Father, that just help us at this time with whatever is needed. We just ask, oh God, that you keep our faith, help us to support one another, and we just continue to just pray, oh Lord, that you keep us together, keep the family, as we grieve and take the news as we're here at this time. We just ask the Lord that the church family, that we will we keep supporting each other at this time, Lord, and bring us through these different trials and different things, so Father, that we face from time to time. We are just never ever sometimes seemingly prepared for these things. And so, Lord, we just ask that your intervention be with us as we seek your support at this time. This is our prayer, Lord, through Jesus Christ. We pray. Amen. Those are our announcements at this time, church. We just continue, Father, congregation, to pray for each other as we look for the support at this time. Thanks. We meet again on Tuesday.
Pass me not, O gentle Savior.